And that this sort of myth of free markets and a free society and an open and free democracy is just a myth.
I said, what? This science and this evidence is being kept secret for religious reasons?
Hillary Clinton clutching a book on extraterrestrial intelligence in 1994 wasn't a photo op. It was a signal. A quiet nod to the reality hidden just beneath the surface of our political theater.
So by 1994, and it was later confirmed to us later in 94 and 95, that when Rockefeller hosted the Clintons, and there's that famous picture of Hillary Clinton holding the book about extraterrestrial intelligence at the Rockefeller Ranch when they were visiting out there. Okay, so she actually is the one who stood up and stopped the briefing and said it's too dangerous. And we're not going to pursue this. And
politicians don't lead, they follow the winds of advantage. If disclosure ever becomes profitable, their lips will part with truths they've long suppressed.
Ultimately, politicians are going to put their finger in the air and they're going to see which way the winds are blowing and see what they can benefit from. They saw this as a lose-lose situation. In other words, it was a situation where if they were to push on this, they would be stepping on some very big toes. Very, very big toes. How big? Several $100 trillion of world economic activity.
The machinery of secrecy is vast and intricate, designed to disorient and obscure. For most, the how feels impossible. But that's the brilliance of the veil.
Now let me back this up now. So the how is hard for some people to wrap their mind around when it comes to this kind of secrecy. But the why is the pièce de résistance. Because if you look at what these projects that are unacknowledged special access projects are doing, what they really have been doing has been trying to acquire, as this top secret Canadian document, the Wilbur-Smith document in 1951 states, the modus operandi, the mechanism of action of these extraterrestrial vehicles, meaning the technology, the science and technology.
Interstellar civilizations don't tinker with primitive rockets or outdated shuttles. They move through the cosmos with technologies that transcend our understanding.
If you're interstellar, you're not using Exxon Jet A fuel. You're not using a rocket like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic is using. You're not using something like the space shuttle. You're using some technologies that are the trans-dimensional end of physics, very high energy electromagnetic field propulsion systems that allow you to drop out of 3D space and appear at another point in space by going through other dimensions. Okay. Now, you can do that without going trans-dimensional by just creating energy from the so-called zero-point field and creating an anti-gravity effect, so you have lifters so that you can go 100,000 miles per hour, make a right-hand turn with no deceleration effect because you've created a bubble in space-time that corrects for one gravity. That's what a lot of the, quote, UFOs are that people see being test flown out near Nellis and the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, and et cetera and so on. We mastered gravity control October 1954. I was not a twinkle in my father's eye. Most of you weren't born at that point. I wasn't. And that is when we mastered gravity control. How do I know this? The third highest ranking official at the Naval Research Labs, the largest defense lab for the Department of Defense here in Washington, has been a friend for years, and he was in the vault and saw the documentation for this, unredacted, because it's all the original documents, and that was the date. So we have not needed jet engines, rockets, oil, gas, public utilities, surface roads, think about this, steamships, internal combustion engines of any sort for at least 60 years.
The petro-oligarchs and kleptocrats wear their masks of power and control, laughing as they manipulate the energy we think sustains us.
The big money folks, that's where the action is. And those are the masters, not the president, not the Congress, not the UN Secretary General, certainly, not the Prime Minister of England, etc. So let's just pull the mask off and just admit that we're living in a period of petro-oligarchs, kleptocrats, klepto meaning theft, like a kleptomaniac, kleptocrats, and that this sort of myth of free markets and a free society and an open and free democracy is just a myth. Because our democracy was hijacked decades ago. Now, on trivial issues like the marginal tax rate or whether you're going to raise or lower payments for Social Security, the President and Congress can fight about that, and it's sort of this show going on, a whirling dervish show of nonsense that goes on. On these issues, they don't want those clowns, is how they view it, dealing with it. So this permanent, unacknowledged covert program has put a lead ceiling in. And only rarely does anything bubble up from there, or down, I should say, to the body politic out of these unacknowledged special access projects. So it became my task to find out how to do that and live to see the next day. All right? Because it doesn't do me any good if I do it recklessly enough. You can't do anything if well, you can, but it's different. So you're doing other things. So this became the central issue. And Lawrence Rockefeller, I suggested, look, we need to then, if the president will not do this, we need to get together a group of people, put together this best available evidence, and also assemble top secret folks who will have the courage to provide credible documentation, testimony about what they've known.
Steven Greer dismisses the idea that extraterrestrials built certain structures, not because it's unthinkable, but because their work would be beyond even these marvels.
Well, honestly, I don't necessarily think that there were ETs that made them. I think there could have been some extraordinary technologies that were used. For example, there is a record of technologies that existed on Earth, of civilization more advanced than we are now. And the question is, were there some use of some type of electrogravitic levitation technologies that were used? The other problem is, even when the Smithsonian paid $5 million to simulate using mathematics and the technology that archaeologists say existed back in the time of the pyramids, those obelisks like the Washington Monument, but those were all one big piece of stone, they couldn't raise the smallest one. With everything we know now about mathematics and engineering, with what's been postulated. So there's something doesn't add up there. But I think it's a bridge too far to claim they were built by ETs. But they were certainly, their construction and the precision of the stones cut, how far they were moved, how they were put into place. There are a lot of questions I have, but I have no proof of how that might have happened, except the man I referred to earlier from Redstone Arsenal area, who is given materiel occasionally. It's not always extraterrestrial. He has been given objects that are tens of thousands of years old or older, that are technological, that have been found in the ocean and elsewhere, that were of human origin and were extremely advanced technologies. So I believe that it's likely that on Earth, prior to the modern era, there have been civilizations far advanced beyond where we are.
Mars tells its own story, with obelisks and anomalies captured in photographs. These remnants whisper of a cosmic history deliberately buried,
that for which we have very little record. And when that record is found, I think it's kind of swept under the carpet. It's interesting. There were years ago when they did the Mars images, and they found that there were these obelisks and strange-looking objects on Mars. I went out to the Goddard Space Flight Center here outside D.C. to meet with Mark Carlotto and some other scientists there, and they said, yep, it's been pixelated out for the public, but there are structures there. And they were very ancient, but we're talking millions of years old, millions. And I was out in California after I had disclosed this to some people, and a man came up to me from JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs, and I didn't know him. He knew who I was and said, "Dr. Greer, here's the issue. You're right, those exist, but we can't disclose that." I said, "Why? It's not an operational ET device. It's not, it's old." He says, "Yes, but you don't understand how powerful this information is." I said, "Why?" He says, "If this was disclosed, it would collapse the fundamentalist orthodox belief systems of every religion on earth." I said, "What? This science and this evidence is being kept secret for religious reasons?" He says, "Yes. Because the creation myths, now I'm not talking about most people, but those sort of fundamentalist orthodox belief systems, they'd all crumble. They'd be completely gone. And you would have to come up with something a little more rational, right? Than the world is 6,000 years old. And we, used to ride dinosaurs, like horses. If you go to the Creation Museum in Kentucky. So this is true, by the way. Those of you in urban areas, you need to kind of wake up a bit about the rest of the world. But that's just how it is. So
Civilizations, light years ahead of ours, don't rely on wires, combustion, or anything so clumsy.
what I tell people is that some of this evidence has been kept secret, not for scientific reasons, but for social belief and how much that information would disrupt most people's foundations of their paradigm and belief. Because there are still huge numbers of people in our country and around the world who are not rational and scientific. They're really based on their these belief systems, which would be upended. And this guy was very blunt about it, and I think he's quite correct. For example, we might find out that the origins of Homo sapiens altogether isn't what we think, either Darwinian or other. So there are all kinds of implications to this issue. This is one of the things when I was out at Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch back when we were setting up things for the Clinton administration back in September of '93 out in the Tetons. And he took me out at night on the deck and he said, look, he said, Dr. Greer, no aspect of life on Earth will be unaffected by this being disclosed. So vast and so large are the implications. I said, yes, Lawrence, that's why it's been kept so secret. So now we're touching on another whole area of concern, and that is, now I don't think most rational religious and spiritual people would have a problem with the fact they don't think the world's 6,000 years old, and there's no reason for them to think that a supreme being would leave all his hopes for intelligent life just in humans. God help us, right? So, but, there are a large number of people and around the world, a significant number of people who would find that very upsetting. So that's been another consideration. It's easy for hyper-rational Westerners who live in urban areas to brush that off. But if you go around the world, and we're talking a world of 8 billion people, they're not all like you in New York.
Steven Greer's encounters weren't accidents. They were deliberate, an invitation. These beings extended their reach.
Well, one thing I learned, which was I didn't understand scientifically, we understand it now, and we touch on it in the documentary Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, is that these civilizations, which are hundreds of thousands to millions of years more advanced than we are, have pretty much perfected what Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink, where he has a company trying to figure out how you can think to your computer, and it does things without wires. Now, as you know, Dr. John at Princeton had experimental electronic devices that people could think to and they would react to the thought. And this has been very well reproduced all over the world. What these civilizations have are extremely accurate interfaces with consciousness and directed thought that pick up the thought as clearly as you and I are talking on this electromagnetic signal. So that's how that whole event happened. It was all based in consciousness and thought. Now, that sounds like something way out there, except when you start talking to people at the CIA, like Dr. Russell Targ, who's a laser physicist for Lockheed, who for 20 years was at the CIA doing consciousness studies, using consciousness to spy on the Soviet Union. So everyone thinks that this is very fringe. It isn't. It's only fringe because the mainstream media ridicules it. But in reality, everyone at a senior level of the intelligence community knows this is real. So I stumbled across it, and then I realized that these guys, these ET civilizations, have that ability. But I didn't understand how it worked. It was all kind of a mystery to me at age 18.
At the heart of this mystery is a transcendent truth, a universal conscious field, weaving every dimension and being into one interconnected whole.
Subsequently, though, I realized that the reason they were wanting me to understand it was, I guess they figured because I had had some kind of sighting and contact and interest in them, but I was also experiencing these higher states of consciousness, that maybe they could, develop something with me as a young man, 18-year-old guy, where I could use it to set up and educate the public about making contact. Now, that was in 1973. I didn't do anything with it for a long time because I didn't know what to do with it until 1990. And we started the CE5 contact protocols, which now, of course, we have hundreds of thousands of people around the world doing it. But it was quite a journey for me as a young boy, doing that. And as you know, last summer, Demi Lovato and her friends on her birthday had the CE5 contact app, and they were practicing it. And they had this amazing ET craft come over. They all saw it. It was very exciting. And they put it on Instagram. So what I'm trying to do is have people understand that you don't have to be some kind of, a Uri Geller or mystic or CIA remote viewer to do this. Every single person who's conscious and awake can connect to that quiet state of mind and do this. Because these civilizations, if you're doing this with the right attitude, let's say, and philosophy, and you're not, afraid and all that kind of silly things, they're going to pick that up and something will happen. Not every time, but they're very interested in humans going into this sort of new understanding of the cosmos, where we realize we and the cosmos are awake, and we're all sort of part of this conscious hologram known as reality.
Steven Greer invites us to peer beyond the veil, to embrace the profound truth that our cosmos is alive, teeming with intelligence.
And that's really what they want us to understand, because that's the foundation of becoming interstellar. And our civilization is at the brink of going from a tribalistic warring civilization to an interplanetary one. But to do that, you have to have some foundation in understanding what is the point where we have something in common. Well, it's not our own humanity. That's humanism, because these are not humans. It has to be something more transcendent, deeper. And that's this conscious field that's universal. Right? I call it universal consciousness or cosmic consciousness. And that they understand very well. It's not just a philosophy, it's actually an operating system. Like your computer has an operating system. This understanding of cosmic consciousness and the fact that the universe is a conscious hologram where everything's connected to each other, like in physics, in a hologram, that they understand, but they also know that we have to not only understand it, and it'll actually begin to walk that talk. Well, I think there's been an interest in this planet for millions of years. Okay, I don't think this is new. I think what became very much where we became a planet of concern, like our State Department has nations of concern, is that in the 40s, when we detonated the first atomic, that sent up a big red flag over this planet going, warning, this civilization can not only be at a point now where they can destroy all life on this planet, but shortly thereafter, we started going into space with Sputnik. We could become an existential threat to other peaceful planets, some of whom do not even have a concept of conflict, we've learned. So I think that we were viewed, it's funny because in the media in Hollywood and the internet and the whole UFO subculture, it's always, why are the aliens here and the dangerous aliens and fear, fear, fear. I'm going, no, you got it upside down, dude. It's the other way around. We're the scary ones. We're the ones who hundreds of millions of people in the last century, and We're the ones who have thousands of thermonuclear weapons, and we're the ones going into space with weapon systems that are classified, that I know about and been briefed on, that are 1,000 times worse than a thermonuclear weapon.